All right, Algebra 1 students, welcome to your 3.7 notes on inequality. Hopefully you enjoyed the music because 650 million of you do. Either that or you just watched the video for the heck of it. So here we go. Absolute value equations and inequalities. So we are going to solve in this set of notes absolute inequalities, absolute value inequalities. And this is your process to do so. You're going to first isolate the absolute value, then you need to separate and solve. And so basically, since we know from our notes from last time when we have absolute value equations, we know that there can be two possible answers because absolute value is a distance. So when we're dealing with inequalities, we still have two possible outcomes, and then we have to make it more complex because if you have two possible outcomes, you have a possibility that your inequality right there and right there could potentially change direction, so you need to pay attention to what's going on with that. I'm going to erase that. I don't like that there. I think you can see it better without my note. So here we go. If you are taking a look at a negative number where the absolute value is greater than that negative number, then that means that it can be all real numbers. So that actually works if we think about it, because the absolute value cannot be negative. And if you have an absolute value that is greater, or the absolute value is less than a negative number, then you can have no solution. All right, so in problem number 1, we have the instructions to solve and graph. Now, most of the time in math, I tell you guys not to worry about tricks, not to try to, think about things in terms of a little trick. But when we do these absolute value inequalities, I like to lean on a trick. And so here we go. That was my funny little joke that I added in there. Sorry if you don't like it. We'll move on anyways. I've got an absolute value there, and I need to set up two possible outcomes for my absolute value. So I'm simply going to place right over here one more inequality. I'm going to have it going in the exact same direction, and I'm going to add a -3 right there. As long as I make sure that when I'm putting these inequalities together and I put them in the exact same direction that the original one was facing, I should be fine with this little trick to lean on. So now I'm going to graph it. I've got my compound inequality sitting there. I've got 0 right there. 3 is right there, and -3 is right there. Okay. It does not include either one of those two, and I would have all of this value in between here. All right, so that is how we do number 1. Number 2, we have the absolute value of y minus 1 less than equal to 8. So our rules are that we first have to isolate that absolute value. So I'm going to, before I set up my two possible outcomes, I'm going to manipulate this inequality algebraically by adding 1 to both sides of my inequality. And now I've got the absolute value of y less than equal to 9. Okay, this is the point where I can break apart my absolute value, and I'm going to set up two possible outcomes. I've got y less than equal to 9, and right over here I've got y is greater than equal to -9. Notice how I used this little trick right here where I basically set up an entirely new equation, or not equation, but inequality, by simply plugging in that -9 and then making sure that my absolute value is aiming in the exact same direction as this first one here. So that is kind of my process behind doing that. When I graph this, I've got a 0, I've got a 9, I've got a -9, and my y is basically sandwiched between those two. And in this case, I'm going to fill in my circle. Let's fill in my circle here. And in this case, I want to fill it in as well. So let's do that. We will fill in that circle, and then it is everything in between there. It's all of that stuff. Y can be anywhere in between there, and it can include -9, and it can include 9. All right, for number 3, we have the absolute value all by itself. This is one where you do need to pay attention to the direction that your inequality is facing. When I break apart my absolute value, I've got x is greater than equal to 5, and right over here I'm going to set up my other possible outcome, which is that -5 is greater than or equal to x. Okay, when I set it up this way, it kind of looks a little funny, so I'm going to change it just a bit. My hand accidentally paused the video there. 5 less than equal to x. Alright, so the reason why I kind of reset it up, if some people like to kind of go ahead and start off by just setting up both of these, I like to have this setup right here going on, just because I use my little trick that works for me. When you graph this one, you've got -5 here, and x is everything less than or equal to that. So we've got our value there. X can be that point, so we would fill that in. And then x goes all the way to -infinity in that direction. And then over here we've got +5. Our value can be equal to 5, so we fill that in. And again, our variable goes all the way to +infinity instead of -infinity. So we've got +infinity for all of the possible outcomes for that one. And we can see our compound inequality coming into focus there as we graph it. Here we go for number 4. We've already got our absolute value isolated. Okay, so we can go ahead and start to set up our new inequality with another setup of an inequality right over here, and that is not a -3, it should be a -7. Mr. Bear, what are you doing? Here we go. When I do this and I've got a compound inequality, I need to set up a situation where I've got, if I do one thing to one inequality, I do it to all 3. Okay, so this is a positive sign here. Okay, y minus 3, I wanted to get rid of that by adding 3, so this is going to cancel out the reason I did that. I've got a 10 over here. I've got a y in the middle. I'm going to have a -4 sitting there. Alright, and then at this point I'm going to rewrite it as y less than -4 and 10 less than y. Alright, I've got 0 right there, -4 right there. I've got an open circle, and y can be everything that direction. And then 10 would be somewhere right out there with an open circle, and my variable capable of being anything larger than 10 all the way to infinity. Alright, for number 5, I'd like you to go ahead and pause the video and try that one on your own. I think you can handle it. So go ahead and pause here. We'll come back here in just a minute and talk about our work. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Hopefully you actually paused your video and tried out number 5 on your own. You can see my work. I got that the absolute value of Q is possible answers, -6 and 6. And so we've got -6 less than equal to Q less than equal to 6. So basically Q is sandwiched between those two numbers, so it could be anything in between those two numbers and can actually include 6 or -6. So we fill in those circles. Alright, number 6, here we go. We've already got our absolute value isolated, so we're going to go ahead and break him out of jail. Alright, so we've got x plus 3 greater than 4, and I'm going to set up another possible outcome with my inequality facing the same direction, and a -4 over that direction. Okay, so the first thing I want to do once I get to this point subtract 3 from all 3 pieces. Anything I do to one piece of the inequality, I got to do it to all 3 pieces, okay, in a compound inequality situation. So now I've got negative 7 over there. X is in the middle, and I've got 1 over here. Again, this is a situation where I don't like the way it's written, so I'm going to rewrite it as x less than negative 7 and 1 less than x. Now I can graph. I've got 0. I've got negative 7 out here. X can be everything less than that. Come on, little arrow. It's going that direction. And I've got 1 sitting there, and x is everything greater than that situation, so all the way to infinity from that. And let's move on to the next one. Alright, number 7, here we go. I've already got my absolute value by itself in this case, so I'm going to break it out. And I'm going to set up another possible outcome with a negative 11 on that side. I've got my inequality facing the same direction. Now I've got a situation where I need to subtract 4 first before I divide by that 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do that from all 3 pieces. So I get negative 15 greater than 3z greater than, let's see, that would be 7. I'm running out of space. Let's rewrite this down here. I'm going to divide all 3 sides by 3, so I'm going to have negative 5 greater than z, which is greater than, well, that doesn't divide nicely, so I'm just going to put a 7/3 right there. Okay. Got 0 right here. I've got, now let's rewrite this. Let's see. We've got z less than negative 5, or, okay, we've got 7/3 less than z. So I've got negative 5 right about there. Z is everything to the left of that. Let's see, 6/3 would be right at 2, so it's going to be somewhere right between 1 and 2. Okay? And Z is everything greater than that situation, so everything that direction. Go ahead and pause your video. Try number 8. Alright folks, hopefully you actually paused your video and tried number 8 on your own. If you did, you should have ended up with negative 4 over 3 less than equal to f less than equal to 4. There's how the graph looks. Let's move on. Okay, first of all on number 9 I need to subtract 8 from both sides. When I do that I end up with the absolute value of y greater than equal to negative 3. Folks, if you remember that from your first slide, that's a situation where we have all real numbers. Okay, so for number 10, we're going to subtract 5 from each side, and we have the absolute value of v minus 9 less than negative 2. Well, folks, that can't happen. That's a no solution. Okay. Now, on this one, on number 11, I do want you to go ahead and pause your video. Try that one on your own. Guys, here's how you do number 11. You have to remember this little trick of flipping your inequality when you divide by a negative, and then you end up with the absolute value of c minus 6 is less than negative 1. And again, that cannot happen.